everybody, my name is Tanya and this is a rather late April wrap-up. So I started filming this video earlier today. I finally got myself organised to sit down and do some filming because I know I've been very patchy lately. I haven't been getting any filming time done, I haven't been getting any editing of what I already had filmed. I'm very behind on watching videos again, very behind on commenting, on replying to comments, very behind on everything when it comes to booktube basically. And so when I finally sat down to film, I had a few things to film, had a fair bit to say, ran out of battery, and because it's been so long since I've filmed, my backup battery was also flat, so mid-wrap-up video, no battery. So I've been waiting for this to charge and editing another video. The first take of this, I was ranting a fair bit, so wasn't really looking forward to editing that anyway, so hopefully I can be a little bit more coherent this time. We'll see what happens. So most of my April has actually been wrapped up already. I participated in quite a few readathons in April. I've been participating in quite a few readathons total lately. So most of what I have read in April has already been wrapped up in one readathon wrap up or another, and all of those will be linked down below. So I've actually only got 3 books to talk about here. Hopefully my battery is charged enough to get me through, and let's just go. So the first book I have to talk about is something that I started for a readathon but didn't quite finish, and that was a book that I picked out for the genre-thon, and that is Carrie by Stephen King. Now this is the book that I was ranting about in my first take of this video, so let's see how this goes. Now that makes it sound like I didn't like this. I did enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to, but there were some things about it that made me a bit angry. So Carrie is my 3rd Stephen King. I have previously read The Shining, which I really enjoyed, and The Stand, which I loved. And for some reason this was the one that I kind of zeroed in on as I really wanted to read this next. I am glad to have finally got to it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I might. As I'm sure most people are aware, Carrie is the story of Carrie, who is a teenage girl who has telekinetic powers. She lives under the thumb of her fanatically religious mother, and she's the subject of quite severe persecution and bullying at school. And that's where it got a little bit uncomfortable for me. So I've spoken before about different books eliciting different feelings in me, and bringing back feelings of my time in high school. Now I didn't particularly suffer strong bullying. There were some periods that weren't great, and there were just some periods where I had no friends and was, told that I wasn't welcome in various groups of girls. So anything that kind of focuses on that does have the tendency to put me back in that kind of headspace somewhat. That doesn't mean I don't want to read those kinds of books and dislike those kinds of books, but there is that tendency to make me think about that and kind of maybe cloud my thoughts about something somewhat to that bent. And that's where I came to the problem. Because of that, and just in general, I wanted to be rooting for Carrie. I wanted to be all about Carrie, all on her side. She is suffering at the hands of her mother. She's suffering at the hands of her classmates. And yet, the way that Stephen King writes her, he doesn't give her redeeming features. He doesn't make her somebody that you immediately like or feel sorry for, and I hated him for that. And I hated him for that because it made me feel guilty in her oppression. Now I know that sounds strange, and I will try and put this out there a little bit more coherently than last time. Basically in the opening scenes of this one, there is detailed quite a traumatic episode of bullying that Carrie is subjected to. Something horrible happens and she's teased, and it kind of escalates into something quite violent really, and everybody's kind of swept up into this kind of frenzy or gang mentality, and people who wouldn't necessarily do that kind of thing are kind of bought in. But because Carrie isn't portrayed in a sympathetic way, King doesn't give her these elements that he makes it hard for you to like her. And because it was hard to be fully on her side, I then felt like I was on the other side, and I felt guilt, and I felt like I had been culpable for this horrendous act of bullying that takes place, that I was somehow part of that guilty side, and it's quite an uncomfortable feeling. And I know this is probably quite a unique thing, that this isn't the experience that everybody gets, but this is how I felt reading this. Because I couldn't fully root for Carrie, because King hadn't written her in a way that I could be, fully sympathise with her, I felt then culpable, and I felt the guilt of the persecution that she suffers. And that is just so opposite to anything that I feel or want to feel, that it made it quite an uncomfortable reading experience in some respects. Now, maybe King's done that on purpose, and if so, kudos to him, because it did elicit that strong reaction in me, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. For all that this made me angry, it wasn't necessarily a negative thing as such. I think anything that can elicit a strong emotion in you is very worthwhile, but at the same time I hated that I couldn't root for her. I wanted to care for the underdog, I guess, and to care for that oppressed, and to care for the person who is subjected to that level of bullying. And Stephen King made it so damn hard for me to do it. Now, I know technically Carrie is meant to be the bad guy in this. This is, technically horror, although I didn't feel, much horror or fear at this storyline at all. In essentials, it's the story of Carrie getting revenge on the people who have oppressed her, and so, wreaks havoc and absolute revenge with the powers that she's been given. So, you're not necessarily meant to root for her, but at the same time, it was an uncomfortable feeling for me to feel like, because I wasn't on her side, I was then having to be her attacker. This is the way that I put myself into a book. When I read a book, I'm in there and I'm experiencing it and living it with the characters. And in some circumstances, they're not lives or experiences that you're wanting to be living, and this turned out to be one of them. Moving on from that emotional side, this is Stephen King's first novel, and it did read like a first novel in a lot of respects. The writing wasn't great. It was, a little bit disjointed in the way that it's told, which is fine. We're kind of getting scenes from Carrie from different people and different case reports and newspaper articles kind of leading up to what happens at the end. So we're kind of building and knowing that something horrible happens. And in general, I think we've all kind of gleaned from popular culture and from the film adaptations of this what that something is. But it kind of, again, made it hard to really get into the story and connect with any of the characters. I cared about what was happening to a degree, but I think it could have been so much more, in that this kind of felt a tame version of what it might have been, and maybe might have been at a different stage of Stephen King's career and his writing experience. This could have been epic, and it just wasn't. So all in all, I enjoyed this, but I didn't love it. I didn't feel very invested in a lot of respects. I felt mad and indifferent in turns, and I don't think it ever fully lived up to its promise. The next book I have to talk about that hasn't been wrapped up anywhere else this month is the audiobook I was listening to for the vast majority of the month, and that is Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. This one I read with Alicia from Ex Libris, and I really enjoyed discussing this one. I thought it was really great buddy read, and I'm very much looking forward to reading more Dickens with Alicia in the future. Little Dorrit, of course, is another huge Charles Dickens. It was another 30+ hour audiobook. I listened to Little Dorrit straight off the back of listening to another 30+ hour Charles Dickens book, that was David Copperfield. I'm not quite sure that was entirely wise, but there was a buddy read on offer and I jumped at the chance, and I'm really glad that I did. I really enjoyed this. It wasn't my favourite Dickens, definitely wasn't my favourite. That would still be Oliver Twist, followed closely by David Copperfield. But I did really enjoy it, and as I said, I really enjoyed discussing it with Alicia as we went along. Charles Dickens often has a theme or something that he's kind of attacking or satirizing or, exposing in his books, and this one is kind of focusing very much on debtor's prison. This one is following the story of Little Dorrit and her family. Little Dorrit was born in the Marshalsea prison where her father is imprisoned for debt, and kind of her story and the view of her through the eyes of our other kind of main character, Arthur Clenham. Arthur Clenham comes back home after his father's death and becomes aware of Little Dorrit, who is working for his mother, and kind of circles around how their lives intersect. There's a fair bit going on in this one, as there often is with Charles Dickens. Quite a few characters. I don't really want to go too much more into the plot than that, because I don't want to give away things that happen. There are certain things that maybe you can see coming and others maybe not. There's a lot of intrigue and an underlying mystery going on that was all very interesting. I didn't care as strongly as I did with other ones, and it's funny because I found myself really enjoying it, but when I stopped and thought about it at the end, and Alicia and I kind of talked about, I don't know that I really cared about Little Dorrit you know, hugely, and I don't think I really cared about either Clennam hugely, but they were our two main characters. And yeah, so I didn't get caught up entirely in their storylines. I didn't become fully invested in it, but at the same time I really enjoyed it and really enjoyed hearing about their lives, and I think some of the supporting characters were a bit more interesting in some regards. The thing is, she's kind of this pure good character and, you know, very selfless, thinking of others, and it kind of leaves her with no personality of her own. And then Arthur Clement is kind of this stand-in good guy and, you know, again, selfless and working for others. And so I don't think either of them have got this really bold personality that a lot of Charles Dickens characters do. They're a little bit more bland in some respects. And so there isn't a lot to hold on there, I felt, you know, personally. And so while I cared about their story and was invested to a degree to see where everything would turn out, I didn't feel that really great personal connection to those particular characters. So the audio version I listened to was again narrated by Simon Vance. This is the same narrator as David Copperfield that I listened to the month before. So not only did I do back-to-back Charles Dickens 30 plus hours, I did them both narrated by the same person, but he does a fantastic job, and he does a fantastic job of differentiating different characters' voices. So I didn't feel like it was just him again, because the characters in David Copperfield had their own voices, and again the characters in Little Dorrit had their own voices, and so it didn't feel just like another monotonous round of him talking at me for 30 hours. It was exciting and new again. There's mystery and intrigue and scandal, and there's a couple of quite poignant scenes that were very sad, and other scenes that were very happy, and like I said, things that made me laugh. All in all, I really quite enjoyed this one. As I said, not my favourite Dickens, but definitely very enjoyable. So I decided after all that Dickens, after back-to-back 30 plus hour Dickens, I would go for something completely easy, just a pure enjoyment read, or listen as the case may be, and I went for an old favourite and something that is very beloved on Booktube and everywhere, and that is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I have read this many times, of course, but I've never listened to the audiobooks, so I decided that I would start listening to the audio versions. I have been meaning to do a proper reread of this for a very long time. I've spoken about before, I've never actually reread Deathly Hallows. I read it on the day that it came out in 12 hours flat, and I have not read the series in its entirety since then. So I started a couple of times. I read the first three a couple of years ago. I read the first book again just after Christmas when I got it, the beautiful illustrated edition for Christmas. But now I've started on the audio versions. So I listened to this one in April, but I've continued on in May, and I am very much enjoying this reread. So it's really interesting to experience it in a new way. So there's not really much I can say about this. This was wonderful. I'm listening to the audio versions narrated by Stephen Fry, and he's doing a fantastic job. There are a few jarring things that it's like, oh, he says that in a different way than I've always pronounced it in my head, or the movies have now made me think it's pronounced. And he seems to change his pronunciation about a few things, both within the book and from book to book, people's voices or the way he pronounces words are changing slightly. So that's interesting, but it doesn't detract from the enjoyment at all. I'm loving this experience, very, very much enjoying it, and yeah, there's not really more I can say about it. It's Harry Potter. It was wonderful. So these are the three things that I read in April, not for any kind of readathon, or at least not completed in the readathon it was meant to be in. So if you've read any of these ones and would like to chat about it, let me know in the comments. I'd be particularly interested to hear what you thought about Carrie, and if any of what I said in this video makes any sense to anybody else, or whether that was just me. As always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.